Episode 2 of this series of videos on Of Mice and Men looks at the characters of George and Lennie. It should be noted that the page numbers given in these videos refer to the version of the novel pictured here. Also, the quotes and examples given here are not exhaustive. You're encouraged to use your own examples and give your own personal opinions to the examiner as well. This video will focus on 5 things: the character of George and the character of Lennie, and their relationship, because it's difficult to make points about one without the other. We'll analyse their dream and why it went wrong, and finally look at the events and the significance of the end of the novel. First, the character of George. He's first described to us on page 19, described as a small and quick, with small, strong hands, sharp, strong features, and restless eyes. These quotes give the impression that not only is he intelligent, but he's also very wary of his surroundings and the people around him. He's clever, as Slim on page 65 describes him as a smart little guy. And this is also shown by the fact that he manages to steal Carson's Luger without anybody noticing, and he successfully misdirects the lynch party away from where Lennie is actually hiding. He's driven to achieve independence and a comfortable lifestyle, which he aims to achieve through the ranch. He looks after Lennie, maybe as a promise to Lennie's dead Aunt Clara, but certainly out of a sense of duty to someone he now sees as his friend. George is a guarded, careful and private individual. This is shown by the way he reacts to Candy when he thinks he's eavesdropping, and of the way he's unsure of Slim at first when he starts asking George questions about his and Lennie's relationship. He's obsessed with protecting Lennie from what he calls trouble. "You keep away from her because she's a rat trap if ever I seen one," George says of Curly's wife on page 54. He's learned this the hard way, through the events of the girl in the red dress in Weed, where Lennie was accused of raping a girl and they had to run away and hide in an irrigation ditch to keep themselves out of trouble. George ultimately realises the futility of his situation by the end of the novel. He says, "I think I knowed from the very first. I think I knowed we'd never do her." What he means here is that he knew from the start that really they'd never achieved the dream of the ranch because of Lennie's disabilities. George in the novel represents thousands of 1930s Americans whose dreams were destroyed by the harsh reality of life and the economy. Lennie's first description is also on page 19. He's described as a huge man, shapeless of face, with large pale eyes, wide sloping shoulders. He walked heavily and his arms hung loosely. Lennie is basically George's opposite. He lacks defined features, and he's described in a vague way, which leaves the reader feeling that he's not really a proper man. This is also reinforced when we find out he has a mental disability. He talks in a childlike way, which is ironic considering he's such a huge guy. Steinbeck often refers to Lennie throughout the novel as an animal, for example, dragging his feet a little the way a bear drags its paws on page 19. He follows George like a dog on page 19, even in the open. He snorts water from the pool like a horse on page 20, and he's described as a terrier when George demands the dead mouse from him. Steinbeck wants to point out that Lennie is a disadvantaged character who is looked down on by normal people. Just like many children, he likes soft things. He likes rabbits, puppies, velvet, and later on in the novel, Curly's wife's hair because it's soft. He's an excellent worker, which is not a surprise. He damn near killed his partner bucking barley, says Slim on page 64. However, he does not understand society, and he says, "I wasn't kicked in the head with no horse, was I, George?" because he doesn't understand why George had to lie to the boss about his condition. He also can't remember anything. "So you forgot that already, did you?" George says on page 21. He also gets into trouble a lot. "I done another bad thing," he says on page 128, and this theme is repeated throughout the novel. This is because Lennie doesn't know his own strength. He kills mice, crushes Curly's hand, kills a puppy, and ultimately, Curly's wife. These mistakes grow in size and severity as the novel progresses. Lennie is misunderstood by others, and he misunderstands society. He doesn't know how to fit in, and is often not accepted by the characters in the novel, particularly Curly. It is this lack of understanding which ultimately kills Curly's wife, shown by the fact that Lennie was in a panic when Curly's wife started to scream. Lennie is a device through which Steinbeck shows that 1930s America was intolerant of others. George and Lennie's relationship is unique because what one lacks, the other makes up for. Where George lacks in size, Lennie makes up for it. Where Lennie lacks brains, George has the intelligence to cope. It's unusual that they travel together, and the boss says to them, "You taking his pay away from him?" This shows that people are used to guys travelling around on their own. George and Lennie are interdependent, despite George doing much of the work in the relationship. They say, "Guys like us that work on ranches are the loneliest guys in the world. But not us. I got you to look after me, and you got me to look after you." This shows that they rely on each other, and together they are stronger. George protects Lennie from a society which he does not understand and does not tolerate him. This idea is mostly represented by Curly in the novel, who eventually gets the confrontation with Lennie that he so wants. Their relationship could be compared to several things. They could be teacher and student, where George says to Lennie, "Lennie, for God's sake, don't drink so much," and "Give it here," demanding the mouse from him. They are like parent and child when George chastises Lennie for blubbering like a baby. "Jesus Christ, a big guy like you." And they are master and dog. Slowly, like a terrier who does not want to bring a ball to its master, Lennie approached. Candy and his dog are a mirror of George and Lennie, where George knows really that Lennie doesn't fit in, but he has got used to having him around. They are bound together by their common dream of the ranch. But overall, it is an ironic relationship. George needs Lennie, but he is also part of the reason why the dream is doomed. So their dream is one of a ranch. For George, it is a rich, detailed, complex vision. It's got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts, got a few berries, he says on page 84. For him, it represents independence, friends, prosperity, and a peaceful life. For Lennie, it's much more simple, which represents his mental disability. He sees it in terms of rabbits and alfalfa, and rabbits, and I take care of him, he says on page 85. For Lennie, the dream simply means happiness and a sense of responsibility. It is their version of the American dream born out of the harsh economic climate that they live in. They talk about it a lot to keep themselves motivated and comforted during harsh times. The vision causes the fight between Curly and Lennie, where Curly wrongly thinks that Lennie is smiling at him when actually he's still smiling at the memory of the dream. The dream is a powerful one, and others want to be involved when they hear about it, such as Candy and Crooks. This dream unites the disadvantaged characters together in a common goal and gives them solidarity against threats, for example, Curly's wife. Ultimately, however, it's impossible to achieve because Lennie just doesn't fit into the society which doesn't understand him. So the end of the novel, George in the end gives in to the burden of looking after Lennie. He saves him from Curly's lynch party or from prison. George learned from Candy and his dog, and this is why George takes it upon himself to shoot his friend rather than let Curly do it for him. Shooting him is partly selfish and partly a last act of kindness he can do for his friend. George talks to Lennie about the dream when he shoots him, giving him a last comforting thought. On page 148, Slim suggests to George that me and you will go in and get a drink. George accepts, and this shows that he's finally slipped